Welcome back to In Sync by Synchronomics. I'm James Holland. I'm here with my co-host and co-founder, Jamie Linkowski.
Hello, everybody.
And as we approach the end of 2025, a shocker to everyone, today's conversation will focus around what's ahead in 2026. Not so much from a prognostication or prediction standpoint, but an idea of what's going to impact both the employer and employees when it comes to anything related to employee benefits. And the key focus is the uncertainty. From the employee side, we see a number of layoffs, AI and robots coming to take over the world. How are politics and taxes and tariffs, all of that impacting them in terms of their job security and income along those lines, which of course brings us back to our favorite person who unfortunately still is the main theme behind a lot of our conversations is our friend Alice. Jamie, again, if you would just take a minute and remind the folks who she is and why it's so important.
Alice is the asset limited, income constrained, yet employee for employers. And it's really more of the same since 2015 when we discovered the financially trapped and the financially strapped employee becoming Alice and that blind spot for the employer.
Okay, great. And on the reverse side, though, from an employer perspective, we had obviously an interest rate cut recently. And as much as the employee fears the technological advances, for some employers, obviously, that's going to be a big help in terms of what AI and any other advancement in robotics can do. But the main focus for today, again, we want to look at from an uncertainty perspective. Obviously, litigation. I know we hit on a few other conversations that we've had, but doesn't seem to be slowing down. Shifting a little on the retirement plan side. It used to be a fee thing. Now there seems to be a little more focus on the investments. There's this whole forfeiture angle, which we're not going to get into today. Healthcare. There's been recently a handful of cases there. Plaintiffs' bar still struggling to try to figure out a standing issue for the participants, but clearly that's not going to slow down anytime soon because those numbers are dramatically bigger than what could be on the retirement plan side. We have heard wind of voluntary benefits in terms of how that's been brought in, not just on the spend, but on the advisory side as well. So not to play the doom scroller here as far as what we're talking, but again, something that won't disappear anytime soon. People have just gone through their renewals. Jamie, we'll get to that a little bit on the healthcare side, where again costs have gone up dramatically, and again people are trying to figure out where that is. It going to be a reduction in benefits? Are they going to, as the money sources get tighter, it becomes a little more difficult for folks. We have no idea what's going to happen on the regulatory front. There's a whole bunch of legislation out there trying to change how PBMs are overviewed, how retirement plan savings can be in effect. So first half of the conversation, we're going to discuss with Jamie in terms of, again, always comes back to, we hear all these people talking about how to do a documented prudent process and where to keep all these things. But what is the action? Again, you're hate to beat that dead horse, but so what now what? We have a lot of information. What are we doing in 26 to truly make a difference, to move the needle besides just the conversation?
Yeah. Let me unpack Alice a little bit further and then connect it to that conversation, James, as it relates to healthcare and what employers should be thinking about, the data that they should be looking into. So I think, again, back to the blind spot that we have been illuminating for employers, which is you have a lot of individuals in your population that are living paycheck to paycheck, negative paycheck to paycheck, or worse, right? Payday lenders, you name it. There's something called the Big Mac Index, right? In 2019, a Big Mac was $4.39. And in 2025, it's $5.79. And if you take that even back further, 1/3 of Americans are, there's a swath of 1/3 of Americans are actually poorer than they were in 2000, just because the price of housing, the price of groceries, and certainly in the last 5 years, we've seen and heard about inflation and real wages, right? And then we're going to hear a couple of political cycles here, 26 and 28, and the word affordability he won't be able to hide from that word. There's something a little scary, right? Everyone in our industry, James, talks about student loan debt, right? 1.7 trillion, and how that is just sapping, the consumer and their buying power. But they always forget about auto debt, car loans, and the delinquencies are up on car loans. The delinquencies are up on credit card debt. And then there's this additional shadow type of credit, which are the buy now, pay later. And there's an increase in delinquencies on those loans. People tend to spend more money, right? 15% more because it's buy now, pay later. Their eyes are very big. Then they're delinquent, and these aren't reported to credit agencies.
Yeah, no, I heard the Black Friday was like 84% in some cases were using that approach. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And online too, right? So it's very, very easy. Amazon has made it very, very easy to overspend, buy now, pay later. And who knows when that comes home to roost. Why does that matter to healthcare? There's 100 million 401k participants in America. 99 million of them don't have money, and most of them do have healthcare, but they can't afford the healthcare. So you combine that with, what I call brokers, money managers of healthcare. They design these plans with high deductible health plans and HSAs. So Alice now becomes a swath of uninsurable, right? They're essentially, the functionally uninsured because they will not go to the doctor, can't afford a copay, can't afford a deductible, and they certainly can't put any money into their HSA.
Yeah, let's pause that for a second, then, Jamie, because that's been a big push lately in terms of the whole. We need health savings accounts. We need to give, but the idea being is, like you just said, the vast majority of people don't have any money to fund that account. So while there are some tax benefits for the people who can, it's really not helping those who need it the most in terms of how to access healthcare. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, our industry will spend a lot of time majoring what I call, majoring in minor things in the echo chamber, and they will talk about the triple tax threat of an HSA. What they won't talk about is that unless an employer matches or puts any money in, less than 15% of the people will fund an HSA. And that's really because the Alice demographic does not have two nickels to rub together, right? So the high deductible health plan was developed for consumerism, gamification. They're even talking about that right now with some of the new health plans, where let's just give them choice. Well, when you don't have money, you don't make the choice. You don't go to the doctor. You can't afford the copay. You can't afford the deductible unless it's urgent or it's probably your child, right? And so employers need to wake up to the fact that they have a swath of those people that they're spending on these benefits. They're not using them. And when they're using them, the other side of the equation is the lack of access that the consumer has when they do go for healthcare, and, prior auths, or they don't get things approved that they need to have done. So that functionally uninsured is inside most employers, and they just don't know it. And it has downstream effects. Even to the extent on the litigation front, James, you're going to have a lot more unhappy people with the results.
And again, not to always go back to that nuclear option in terms of, but the finding a plaintiff, and again, we'll save that for another topic, another day, in terms of the validity of some of the litigation and people concerned that now it's too easy. But there's also a lot of moving parts. There's insurance companies, there's hospitals, there's doctors, there's politicians. So it's very easy to do a lot of finger pointing. What are some of the key things an employer can do to step out of that conversation, but focus on providing for because again, regardless of where this goes, in terms of, are we headed towards universal healthcare, single payer? Yeah, in the near future, obviously, it doesn't seem like that's going to be the approach, and the overwhelming majority of people get it from their employer. So what can the employer do to quiet some of that white noise and help develop I know we talk a lot about, a term we use is unbundling, in terms of, right now, instead of getting it all in one place, why not put the puzzle pieces back on the table and then look at them individually and how you control it. So what are some of the things employers can do?
One way I would say it is, follow the law, right? Because now you have the power to ask for your data. And whether you want to call it a fiduciary process or just a simple but aggressive procurement process, get your data and understand what you're spending. Get your data and understand where your people are going and seeking care. Get your data and understand what type of pills they're putting in their mouth through what pharmacy benefit manager. You mentioned it. If you are sitting with what I call a healthcare money manager, who is a broker, get their compensation, understand how they're getting paid directly and indirectly, and hold their feet to the fire for the services rendered. If you are with a money manager who took you to a very convenient bundled carrier like a Blue Cross, a United, Cigna, or Aetna, understand that you could unbundle those things and try and put them back together from an employee experience standpoint, and there are savings out there. And if you're not working with a healthcare broker or a healthcare money manager who's doing those things, you may need to also look elsewhere and find someone who can be much more aggressive. So my main theme would be, don't just be informed by a broker who's getting paid by that system. Get involved. Get much more involved with data.
Excellent. And so sum it up in terms of all the different things we talked about this morning. What's the biggest healthcare risk for an employer you think coming in 2026? If there was one you could pinpoint.
I would say inertia. I would say doing the same things and expecting different results, which I think is also the definition of insanity, and thinking that your healthcare is going to go down when it's probably at an all-time high. It's accelerating at a very high rate, and your folks are aging, right? They're getting older, which healthcare costs. There's more frequency and there's more severity, and there's more of them. There's a number of them, more of them, so the frequency is also going up in addition to the cost of that, the unit cost of healthcare. It's just going to go one direction. And so if you don't do anything and you just submit to that inertia, you will just continue to pay more, as will your ALICE demographic. And we've also seen through polls that employers are talking about talent being their number one concern. Well, if someone can't afford to pay their bills, including but not limited to healthcare, they will look for other places to go work, or they will have a side gig, which means they're not 100% yours. So it is connected to recruiting, hiring, retention, turnover, culture, etc.
So again, so the message then from the employer side, and I think we've discussed this a few times as well, is I think it needs to be more of a partnership discussion, because while the the employee's going to complain about increased premiums and higher deductibles and all of those things, there's a huge expense that the employer is paying on behalf of them as well. And I think it's time for that conversation of, hey, look, this is a big nut we're all sharing in, and being a little more transparent in terms of, because I don't think the employees fully understand the expense that the employer is also footing with regards to there. And if they team up and take that control you talked about, I think there's an opportunity for that. What's the best way for them to communicate it? How are they going to get to the employee to say, hey, listen, we understand, we feel your pain, and we're here to make this better for all of us, because we understand that obviously the happier and healthier you are, the more productive you are, and then we get that elusive win-win, if you will.
Yeah, I'll double down on your comment. Both the employer wins with that aggressive procurement process, and the employee wins. Going back to the Big Mac index, by the way, it used to take 110 hours to pay for healthcare. Right now, it takes 173 hours of an employee's time to pay for healthcare. So it's gotten more expensive over time. In terms of communication, that is a multifaceted, multi-level strategy, which would involve print, in-person, webinar, Zoom calls, and probably the lowest common denominator would be some type of mobile communication to your people, because most people are getting that information on their phone and they take action very quickly when they get something, even in the simplest form of a text.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's one of the things obviously we'll keep an eye on.
Now I'm going to flip the script and put you on the hot seat. We've talked enough about health benefits. Now we're going to talk about retirement. what are the things that employers should be thinking about looking forward into 2026 about retirement?
Yeah. So again, and one last touch into that retirement aspect. 2/3 of adults are worried about how they're going to pay for it in retirement, and or is it going to derail their retirement? We again another common theme in our conversations is how many people work here because they have to, as opposed to how many people work here because they want to. People are working longer because it's the only way to afford that health care, which again could be, and then they're spending more dollars. So these are folks who already have retirement savings in place and they're concerned. So again, I think one of the things that they're going to have to focus on is try to find that balance in terms of getting people at all the things you talked about from a cost saving standpoint, but also push on the fact that maybe you need to amp up the savings aspect. One of the things we hear a lot about in terms of financial wellness and education. And again, that's fine and it's important. But if you're educating people on a broken system, or you're having them put money into a plan that is not fully efficient for them, it's just going to eat into that retirement savings dollar. So I think with all the changes coming down the pike in terms of so not-for-profits now, there's a bill that passed Congress that I'm certain will get past the Senate that will allow CITs into 403B plans. So here's a whole nother investment angle that people are going to need to be educated on. Are we going to talk about changing the ages for RMDs and with the automatic enrollment? So in 2025 was the first year that the auto enrollment for new plans was put into place from the Secure Act. So we're going to have a whole host of new people getting into retirement plans. So why not and you mentioned the last comment about the phone. The younger generation wants that instant access. So what are we doing to help them fully understand? Because I think they're more engaged. I think they're clearly more engaged than our generation was when it came to retirement. So while they're getting the information, make sure it's the information they need and that they can process so that they can take full advantage of those retirement plans. Again, we're going to have to go back to the litigation aspect is always a concern. The attorneys have come down market. It used to be 3, 4, $2-3 billion plans. Now you're seeing a couple $100 million. It's going to sneak down to the $100 million side. And again, not that we're advocating for the stick, because we prefer the whole carrot approach to it, but that inertia you talked about, that not doing anything, that apathy, that, everything's, fine. Nobody's complaining. I'm too small. These are all thoughts that are going to make you, that put that target on your back, that is going to expose you to something that, again, is an easy fix if you just take the time and find the qualified people. So I think it's very important to almost not do a complete reset, but early on in the year, find that advisor, find out what they're doing, how much they're making.
And James, jumping in here, we've heard about the crackdowns and retirement plans for years. What's changed, or is it still just much of the same? I know there was the Cornell decision. You want to bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about it. So the Cunningham-Cornell case was, again, another Supreme Court case. So again, not to turn this into a legal discussion, but there have been 3 Supreme Court cases that have all come down for the plaintiff. There's a potential Home Depot versus Pizarro versus Home Depot is one that might show up, which might shift the burden of proof in terms of right now the plaintiff is responsible to prove that the harm took place. They're arguing that maybe that might shift to the defense. And again, we don't need to get into the legalities of it. But if that happens, then now there's even more concern for the employer. There's just that it all goes back to information. Again, people are accessing the information faster, they're discerning it quicker, and they're looking for answers. As jobs get tight, as people get laid off, then they start getting more concerned about their money. We don't have any idea. The market itself, up and down. So you have risk in terms of who's touching the money, who's educating the people, how is the plan structured? I mean, the list goes on in terms of, and again, it's a personal one. There is no corporate veil for the fiduciaries associated with this plan. So you really do want to make sure that you're solely and exclusively taking care of those participants.
So James, I have I have a fiduciary that's helping me with my plan. How do I know if my plan's at risk? Walk me through that.
Yeah, you every year you file a tax return for your retirement plan. People don't realize it, but the 5500 is a report that's filed with both the IRS and the Department of Labor that gives you the overview of that. What questions are you asking? Okay. Have you looked at cost in terms of what you're paying the record keeper, what you're paying the advisor, what you're paying for investments? Have you looked at in terms of how are they selected? How are they monitored? There's a whole process that goes, and what role is that advisor taking? Are they a 321, 338? We can get into different levels of fiduciary somewhere down the road, but you want to document all these things. Who's responsible? Who's signing the forms? Who's making the communications? All of these different things, and it's not long. You as a fiduciary, you should have an independent assessment done by yourself or an outside party every year. It's just like getting a physical for your own self-being. This way, you have a list, and hey, this is great, this needs work, and now you're showing that you're putting the participant first, and then you can address whatever concerns come up. So it's like an annual physical for your 401k health, if you will.
On the healthcare side, when we get our benefit package compliant, that can often boost the bottom line. Is there a corollary to that on the retirement side? It seems a little less clear cut to me.
Yeah, I don't think it's nearly as big from a dollar perspective, but yes, if you can control some costs, obviously no one's predicting the markets. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know it's going up, down, the whole bit. But if you control the costs, which is obviously the greatest impact on the employee, then more money stays in their account. So again, it's not so much a dollar perspective, but it is obviously the less you take out, the faster it's going to grow. And obviously compounding being the most powerful force in the universe can be a positive if you can control the cost.
And if you've done the work to get compliant, what have you seen in terms of retention, culture, engagement, satisfaction with your employees, and what should you be telling the employees?
That's the whole thing is to your point, is you got to have that communication from every possible angle. Hey, look at this. We have squeezed every last dollar. No one, it's funny because you ask people and they still do surveys, how much does your retirement plan cost? And sadly, a great number of them still think it's free. No one believes it to be free, but if you can control all the costs and say, hey, look, we've squeezed every last dollar out of all these folks. We've added these other enhancements. You really can get people. Maybe that helps increase the match. Maybe that helps people learn to save more and sooner. So those are all, and communication. Tell them, if you're sharing all the information and the plan is doing great, then you're going to obviously get folks to be more engaged, and that's the key.
Right. So we've covered a lot of ground today, and it's time for my favorite part of the show. And normally you put me on the spot with, so what, now what do our listeners need to know for 2026?
Yeah. From a retirement plan perspective, employees, get engaged, start asking the questions. Employers, get the right people in place to answer those questions, because the sooner you remove that target from your back, the whole lot easier things come, not just for you, but again, you have a more productive workforce, happier workers, and one less headache to, cross off that never-ending list.
Sounds good.
And of course, the biggest so what, now what for 2026 is be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'll be rolling out new expert interviews on different topics, ranging from lawsuits, how to impact your business, helping to boost morale and profit margins. So head over to synchronomics.com to learn more about it, and we'll see you back here next month. Thank you.